Does your SSX23 do this? If so, I can show you how to fix it. Not only that, I'm going to go very slowly and show you every step that you need to make and every tool that you need to fix this. Stay tuned. So it turns out the problem inside your gun is caused by something called the nozzle assembly and the magazine. We can actually repair the nozzle assembly with pieces of sandpaper and then it'll work perfectly. So I kind of had an idea what was going on inside the pistol, so I actually bought 3 nozzle assemblies. So let's look really close at the nozzle assembly and the magazine to see what's going on. So how the nozzle assembly works with the magazine is like this. You'll notice the magazine has a spring here. These BBs are spring fed up into your gun, so there's always a BB there ready for whenever you pull the trigger. If you look really close here at the nozzle assembly, it's spring loaded. It has a tube right here and a rectangular part, and it has a square hole that leads up into this little tube right here. And you'll notice also in the magazine there is a gasket here with the same size hole. So what happens is when you pull the trigger, this nozzle assembly goes forward and pushes a BB out of the magazine. This square hole on the nozzle assembly and the square hole in the magazine made up. This button here on the back is then pressed. Green gas comes out of the magazine. It comes through this hole and it goes into the nozzle, and the green gas goes into the barrel and propels the BB out of the gun. The problem that's happening here is when the nozzle assembly pushes that BB out, these BBs right here try to feed up into the gun, and it presses down really hard on this piece on the nozzle assembly here. And I'm going to use a screwdriver here to demonstrate a little bit. So it comes across like this, pushes the BB out, and I can actually feel the BBs pressing down, and they press down on the nozzle assembly. And that force presses this nozzle assembly, and this nozzle assembly either can't retract or it goes forward and it can't push another BB out. So what we need to do is we need to work on this piece here to get rid of the friction. So here's a kind of like a little cheesy drawing I've done of everything. So here's the magazine, the feed lips on the magazine, a BB, here's the nozzle assembly. This represents that little tube right there that I showed you, and this rectangular piece is right here. The problem is right here on the BB. There's too much friction. So the fix that I propose is we're going to do this. We're actually going to take this piece and we're going to cut it down a little bit like this, and then we're going to polish it. So instead of this much friction hitting the BB, we only have about this much friction. So we're actually lowering the friction maybe down to 20%. And I've done it on my pistol and it works great. So let me show you how to take the pistol apart, and then I'm going to show you how to fix it, and then we'll reassemble everything back together. All right, so this part right here actually freaks out people just a little bit, and there's really no need to. This is actually really simple. Just take your silencer off, and then we're going to pull out the magazine. What we need to do, we need to remove this slide because that nozzle assembly sits right up here in the pistol. So you have this pin here that holds everything together. If you look really close here on the top of the pin, you'll see a little tab right there. And here on the slide, there's a little indentation right here. So we actually have to mate up that tab with this indentation so we can take the slide off. And all I'm going to do is just, I got a screwdriver here, and you see it's rounded on the bottom. You can use a piece of metal if you want, but if you use a piece of metal, you're actually going to mar your pin. So all we need to do is just, and if this is the first time you're doing this, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult, but the pin just pushes out like that. Then you line up the tab with the tab on top, grab your pin, and then just start working it out. Just back and forth, pulling up, and it'll come right out. It's not that difficult. First time I did it was a little bit difficult. So take the slide off, it's really easy. Just take your thumb put it on the back of the slide and push it forward until it stops. When it stops, grab the front of the slide, not the whole gun, just the front of the slide, and it'll lift off. And then you can pull the slide off. There we go. We don't need the bottom part here. What we need is in the slide. Right here is your barrel, and your hop-up unit are all right here in the front. Use your thumb, pull those back, then right here is your nozzle assembly. We're gonna pull that nozzle assembly out, and now let me show you how to fix this. So to fix this nozzle assembly, what we need to do is we need to push it forward as far, not as far as you can go, just push it forward just a little bit. Use your thumb to hold it. We don't want to sand down this whole rectangular bar right here. There's too much of a danger of you hitting this little rectangular piece right here that mates up with that white square gasket on the magazine. If you sand some of this down, you will not get a good seal, and if you don't get a good seal, then your gun won't work properly. So we're gonna start maybe about 6 millimeters and about 1/4 of an inch up from the nozzle, and I'm gonna take my thumb and I'm gonna put my thumb down over it so that I don't accidentally sand that little square. I'm going to take my 80 grit. These are all about 1-inch squares, which is about 25 millimeters by 25 millimeters for the rest of the world. And I'm going to take my 80 grit, and what I want to do is I want to just sand down these corners here a little bit. Don't get too aggressive with this 80 grit because this 80 grit really cuts quickly. You don't want to cause problems with the integrity of the piece. So just sand it down a little bit like that. And that's all you need to do. Come up to the front here, this little piece right here, you just want to bevel that off just a little bit. Get these edges pretty good. And then once you get those edges down just a little bit, blow on it just a little bit. You want to keep those little plastic pieces out. And if you look at it, what you want to see is you want to see like a little pyramid shape here. And just keep working that just a little bit, keep working it down until you have those edges flat. Also, when you sand, you want to sand parallel to this little piece, the movement of this piece. If you sand across this way, it actually increases the friction inside the gun and it won't work correctly. So just sand that down just a little bit. You don't need a whole lot. I think that's done. Next, I'm going to take my 220 grit and I'm going to go over it again. So right now there's a whole lot of 80 grit scratches on this. The 80 grit works quickly, gets everything down. You can use 100 grit if you want, but just keep sanding that parallel down, and you want to get rid of those 80 grit sanding marks that you have in there, those rivets. And it doesn't, and you feel it. You can actually feel it's actually getting pretty smooth in there. Just keep working it just a little bit. It doesn't need a whole lot. And you can see right here, I don't know if you can see that, there's that little bit of plastic that I got coming out. So now we have 220 grit scratches in here. So now we want to get rid of the 220 grit scratches by using our 400 grit. And we just want to sand that on either side, just where we were, sand along the sides. And what we're hoping to do here is use this 400 grit and get rid of those 220 grit scratches. And it doesn't take a whole lot to do that. As a matter of fact, you can feel it. Run your finger across it and you can say, oh yeah, that's getting a lot smoother. That's getting a lot smoother. That is really smooth. Next, we're going to take our 1000 grit. And once we do our 1000 grit, you will notice with your finger a huge change in the way that feels. It gets really, really smooth really quickly. As a matter of fact, if you look at it, it actually has a little bit of shine on it because we're polishing that. And that's what we're hoping to do. We're polishing that so that will get rid of the friction inside the gun. And this little piece right here will just slide over the top of that BB and it will work perfectly every time. All right, so now if you just feel that, man, that is just like so smooth after that 1000 grit. So let's take this down even further. And you can actually, like I said, if you look at it really close in the light, you can actually see a little bit of a sheen on it because it's polished. But now I'm going to use 2500 grit. It's optional. Don't worry about it. And just put it in there like this. And this 2500 grit really, really polishes this out. And it doesn't take a whole lot. This 1000 grit and 2500 grit, you can feel it sliding off. So now this piece is completely polished. And if you feel that with your finger, man, that is so smooth right there. Basically a frictionless surface. And that is exactly what we're after. Don't go too heavy on this. Don't go crazy. You just want to cut it down just a little bit. And I'll put it up here really close. I'm hoping that the camera can focus in on that. But look how shiny that is after that 2500 grit. That is really highly polished. And that's what we want. That will reduce the friction of the BB pressing on the top of this. So let's go ahead and take our gun and put it back together. So we have our repaired nozzle assembly here. This really does not require any lubrication. If you feel like you want to lubricate it, you can take a little bit of dry graphite and put it right here on the top. Don't use any liquid in this gun at all. So let's reinstall this. So here is our slide, and you can see I can push this forward fairly easily. If you find out that this does not slide forward, probably what's happened is this bar right here has come out a little bit and it's kinked against this piece here. So when you try to push it forward, it's pushing up against this. Just take your fingers, just pick it up, move it back into place until you can slide your barrel forward again. So let's slide our barrel forward, and then you'll see there's this little tab right here, and if you look, there's another little tab right here on your slide. Those should line up just like that. I mean, it just slides right in. It's pretty easy. Then let your barrel slide forward and look to make sure that there's no spaces or any gaps in here. There is a way to take this nozzle assembly and put it too far forward. If you put it too far forward in the gun, what you're gonna see is you're gonna see a big gap right here, and you do not wanna see a gap right there. Next, the hard part. So you'll see two little raised areas right here. I like to call them tabs because that's what they are. They're on both sides of the pistol, and you'll see these two little points. So what you want to do is you want to take the point end of your slide and you want to push it between those two tabs. Double check both sides, it is, and then you want to, as you push back a little bit, all you want to do is just lower your slide into the gun and then push it back, and then it's back together again. Don't fire your pistol right now. If you fire your pistol right now, it's probably going to come apart because you need to put your pin back in. To put the pin back in, it just slides in like it did before. And you'll notice the little tab we have right here. The little tab, you can push it in just a little bit, but then it'll stop. You have to line up the notch of the pistol with the tab. And that whole pin will slide back in, and now this gun is repaired. So, if you have any questions or you have any problems on putting this thing back together, make sure you leave me a comment and I will watch this video closely so I can help answer your questions. But I think right now, I think we should test it. Let's see how this thing is working. All right, here's our fixed SSX-23, and here is our magazine, and I think I have like 22 BBs in it. It's got green gas, so let's try it and see how it works. I shot 22 times. Actually, maybe I didn't. There we go. And it worked perfectly. No trigger lockups, no double feeding, and that's your fix. If you guys have any questions on how to fix this pistol, leave me a comment. I'll try my best to answer them. And I also have a couple more videos up here for you guys to watch. So thanks for watching, and I would really appreciate it if you give me a like and a subscribe on this one. So you guys have a good one, and if we're out on the field together, I promise that I'll be looking for you in my scope. Shrek out.